So, this part of the interview I enjoy because this is going to be a pattern of the interview process with Mr. Davidson and Mr. Gilbert. So, Mr. Gilbert says something unintelligible. Mr. Davidson says, "Do you know his name? I told you last night. What is his name? Tell me, what is his name?" Mr. Gilbert says, "Bishop? I don't know." Mr. Dorton says, "Albert." Jonathan Harvey Gilbert says, "Albert Bishop, not Bishop, Basham." "Basham, Albert Basham. Okay, are you sure you didn't get with him that afternoon?" I feel like I have feelings on that I'm just going to let rest because this tactic will come back again and my feelings will clearly be known as we continue. So at this point, they are now talking to Jonathan about the amount of money on the victim, which again is continuously an uncertain amount and will never really be clarified. Jonathan, this is Mr. Jack Davidson speaking. Jonathan, do you admit that it was more than $20 in all from him, right? Yes, sir. More than $40? It could be. Okay, somewhere in that range. Jonathan says, "You all just told me to give you an estimate, so..." Jack Davidson says, "Yeah." Jonathan Gilbert says, "I gave you an estimate." Jack Davidson, "Right, just give me an estimate. But it was more than $20, you're certain of that?" Now, those were excerpts from the final confession statement, which was revised to 35 pages. Now, Jonathan's actual interrogation is 180 pages, and this will be excerpts from that. So it begins with Jack Davidson says, "You didn't walk up there for any other purpose?" Jonathan says, "Well, I was walking up there just to, maybe I would stop at Long John's and get me something to eat, or because I like Long John's, I just felt like walking." Mr. Davidson says, "Had you eaten breakfast that morning?" Jonathan says, "No." Jack Davidson says, "So you hadn't eaten anything? Okay, so you just walked up there." I understand, again, the police techniques, and I understand that they're trying to throw him off his game. I feel like that's a very interesting tack to use with an 18-year-old. So Jonathan now has explained that he just made $35 for helping Mike Rogers cut brush. And with this $35, he went to the store and bought 2 loaves of bread, 2 packs of bologna. What else? 2 cans of Vienna sausage because I was wanting some Vienna sausage, and 3 pops. And I think we bought, and 2 cakes. I say that because this is the nefarious character we're dealing with. He bought 2 cakes. So now we're going to take a little bit more of a trip into this questioning because this is important because Jonathan does make a false confession, some of which you had already heard parts of. So Jonathan has just been questioned about the lighter. Jack Davidson says, "And that's still out there right at your house then, right in your room, sitting in there where?" Jonathan says, "It's in my duffel bag." Jack Davidson, "In your duffel bag? What duffel bag?" Jonathan, "I got a big ol', kind of like a Raiders duffel bag." Jack Davidson, "Is it a black one?" Jonathan, a red one." Jack Davidson, "Just a regular?" Jonathan, "Red." Jack Davidson, "Red. I'm sorry, I do have a hearing impairment." And now at page 38, we're going to begin to talk about if Jonathan did this murder. Jack Davidson, "Are you responsible for anything out there, Jonathan? Let me ask you that, with his death." Jonathan, "No, sir." Jack Davidson, "If you are, you start telling us right now. Start talking to me now." Jonathan Harvey Gilbert, "I wouldn't hurt." Jack Davidson, "Do you know who did it?" Jonathan, "No." Jack, "Huh?" Jonathan, "No." Jack, "Who did?" Jonathan, "I said I don't know. All I know is he is getting a phone call when I hollered at him. When I talked to him, he said he had just gotten off the phone with somebody and he'd be there in a minute. He would go there. I went with him. Jack, is that what he told you on the phone? Jonathan, Jack, that he was getting a phone call. At this point, Frank Dorton has decided he is going to come join the party. So, this will take on another exciting twist. Frank has turned the tape over to side B. So now we have nothing exciting going on. They're talking about a stolen CD player that Jonathan had recovered from a Mr. Bandy. And Mr. Bandy said that he had never held it for Jonathan and that Jonathan had purchased it at a store. Jonathan is saying that, in fact, he had this tape player. It was readily available and it was not this other brand. So that is several pages of dialogue until we come back to Jack Davidson again saying, well, do you know anything about a lock blade knife? Do you have a lock blade knife? Jonathan says, Jack says, never. Jonathan says, well, just one of them little kind you stick in your pocket and pull out. One's about like that. And he demonstrates how long it is. So he had one about like that. And Jack says, that's about, yeah, I know, that's just a pocket knife. What you're talking about there, it's about 4 inches with the handle. Jonathan says, no, the knife comes out like this. And he talks about that knife for a minute. And what Jonathan reveals about the knife is that, in fact, he doesn't have any anymore because the police took them the last time he was arrested. So much like when we talked about that lighter, in the non-confession statement, Jonathan states, I didn't have no lighter fluid, so there was no need in me carrying around my lighter because it would just be sitting there trying to strike when it ain't got no fluid in it, in regards to the engraved lighter that was questioned about being in his possession. So at this point, Jonathan was not even aware of where the lighter is, and that will become of interest. So now let's pick back up with the knife. I apologize. So it's a locked blade. Jack Davidson. So what did you do with that knife? Jonathan, I ain't seen it in a while. Jack Davidson, you haven't seen it in a while. Is it yours? Well, Jonathan, I let my friend borrow it and he kind of stuck it in his pocket. Jack, who's your friend? Jonathan, John Brown. As a matter of fact, it was with him. Jack, it was John Brown that you gave it to? When did you give it to him? Jonathan, I gave it to him before Christmas. I ain't owned a knife in a long time. Jack, why would you give it to him? Jonathan, because he needed to cut some kind of string with it. Jack, now has he got it? Jonathan, I don't know. Jack, what was the occasion you would have done that? Jonathan, well, Jack, and not ask for the knife back. There is a lot of inconsistencies. Jonathan, I know. Jack, that I'm coming out with, and that's wrong. Jonathan, So now they are questioning Jonathan about his own personal watch. Jack Davidson, and you've had it. Jack Davidson, okay, you got to be back up there. Where did you get that watch anyway? Jonathan, my dad bought it for me in Ohio. Jack, and you've had it ever since? Jonathan, Jack, and you wore it up there at the jail? Jonathan, yeah, it's written up in there too. Jack, is it? Is that the watch you had that was in inventory? Jonathan, it sure is. Jack, well, we've still got some inconsistencies in regards to the lighter now. Your aunt said it does have your initials etched into it. Jonathan, well, that's the one I owned before, which I don't have no more. I owned one before that had my initials on it. You did? Jack, where'd you get that one? Jonathan, the same place. Every time I buy a Zippo, that's where I get it from. Now, at some point, detective, whose name is omitted, literally states this. There are too many things here, Jonathan, that's going to tie you to this that you're not going to be able to explain. Jonathan, you've been in detention and jail for a while, where you needed that money. Some money, I mean. We've got to face the facts. I mean, you need to know you needed money. Jonathan states, I wouldn't need money that bad to kill somebody. The investigator, who's unidentified, I don't think you intended to. I don't think you wanted to, Jonathan. I really don't. You're not that type of person, but things have a way of escalating. If you didn't intend to do that, then that's what you need to tell us. There's a whole big difference between taking money and taking someone's life over money. Do you understand? Jonathan affirms, and then unnamed investigator states, if you needed money, then that's fine. Then you tell us. It is what it is. And then unnamed investigator states, you're not a good liar. And then Jonathan says, I know I'm not a good liar. And then unnamed investigator says, you're not a good liar. I mean, all right, tell me this. Are you not lying around certain things that you're telling us? This proceeds for several pages of whether or not Jonathan is a good liar and what he might specifically be lying about. And proceeds for several pages. So Jack Davidson at this point begins what I like to call the diatribe. Jack Davidson, blank, brought back down there from the jail, and they've had it, and they gave it to you there Thursday, and you had it, and you bought lighter fluid, and you had it in your pocket at that particular time, in your shirt pocket, and it slipped out when you bent over there. When you was up at the cab where you was at, it slipped out of your pocket and fell on the ground, and you forgot about it, and we've got it here. And this is it. You've already identified it. It puts you right there at the scene at the time the incident took place. It puts you right there on the same day, that Friday, the same day that you went up there and called the taxi cab and asked him to meet you, to pick you up, the same day. You've already told me, and you've told us before at this particular point, that you had lost a lighter with your initials on it. You've told us many inconsistencies. You did. You were there. Now admit it. You were there. You were up there at that location. You drove through there. You were with him. You asked him to go out there. You did. Yes, you did, Jonathan. I think at this point, I would have confessed just to shut this man up. Now, this continues. Jack Davidson, no, why are you telling all of these inconsistencies in your statements? Why are you telling me? Why are you so nervous every time we start? I notice in your face you start getting flushed and you start getting real nervous about it. You remember some of it. You remember exactly what took place up there. Yes, you did. Jonathan says, I didn't touch the old man. The only thing I done was shook his hand. That was it. Investigator, no, you know what you're trying to do. Jonathan says, what? Investigator, you're trying to stall us till you think of a reason. Jonathan, no. Investigator, now let me finish. You're trying to stall us to get you enough time to think of a reason to try and justify or make it less about what happened up there. Now, in regards to the lost lighter, here is Jack Davidson's theory. Let me ask you something. If you lost your lighter and somebody else found your lighter, how in the hell did they lose it again with a matter of hours? Now you tell me that, Jonathan. How in a world, could they do that and lose that lighter twice in a matter of hours, you know? Now, this is clearly at a point where Jack Davidson might be losing his cool, and the next page indicates that. You lost it up there when you had to pull him up the road up through there, and you got out. And when you bent over at that particular point, you probably bent over and you may have struck him. You may have struck him and tried to check with him to make sure he was alive or hurt him or whatever. And then all of a sudden you realized you did hurt him. And you didn't know. You panicked at that particular time, Jonathan, because you didn't want to go back to jail. You panicked at that particular point and made a decision what to do because you figured they wouldn't believe me. They won't believe me what took place here. That's exactly what you thought. And you said, I have to do something. That's what you did. So you want to go ahead and tell us all of these inconsistencies, all of these untruths in order to justify it. We have talked to a great number of people, and I have talked to 1,000 different people, and I've got blank statements from 1,000 different people, and they've told me the truth. And they said, hey, yes, I am. I know. I realize. But please listen to me here. Let me tell you what took place. Let me tell you right now what took place, because I want to tell you. And I don't want you to speculate. I don't want you to come out and say this is what took place or the evidence shows this is what took place, because we don't know until you start telling us, Jonathan. So start telling us what took place up there where he was found. Why did you cover him up anyway? Why did you cover him up? Now, Mr. Basham was covered with 7 railroad ties. Railroad ties are 8 feet long and made of plywood and weigh between 100 and 300 pounds, on the average 200 pounds. And as I told you, by their own report, Jonathan weighed 155 pounds. And there was no evidence of these railroad ties having been dragged. So that being said, Jack Davidson, I do think really liked his voice, and I am certain he was a great detective, but he really loved to expand on the tale. Jack Davidson, I don't think you went up there with the intent of doing that. I really don't. I think in a sense that you needed money and was going to try and take off because you just got out of jail and knew at that particular point you don't want to go back to jail. I think he was going to take some of the money off of him and run, and then all of a sudden something happened and he started fighting you. And then you did something at that time. You don't even remember what you did, but you did something, and then you looked at it and you said, "Oh my gosh, what have I done? I need to cover it because they won't believe what I took in the first place. They won't believe what took place here." And then at that time you went and did what you did. You pulled him over there. You checked him. You found that he was dead, and you pulled him over there. You started worrying about it. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Didn't you? You worried about it, Jonathan. You did. Again, let's think about Mr. Basham's injuries. His face was pulverized by the autopsy report. The proof is they didn't even examine Jonathan's hands for these injuries. His hands would not have been healed 2 days later from the amount of injuries on this man. I'm sorry, I'm saying that with my nurse practitioner authoritative voice because the amount of pummeling to this man's face, including the broken teeth and the black eyes, would have resulted in bruising to Jonathan's hands and knuckles that would not have healed on any human in 2 days. So Jack Davidson, who is quickly becoming the enemy of my tale, the bad guy, if it were. Hey, Jonathan, you know what we'll do? We'll just check everything out, and we'll prove everything you've told us here that you claim to be true. We'll check it out, and we'll find that it's untrue. We will. We will. And at that particular point, you see, that's more inconsistencies completely. It's just compounding itself. Your inconsistencies are compounding itself. It keeps stacking on top of each other. And you know that you did it. Frank knows that you did it. Danny knows that you did it. I know that you did it. We all know that you did it. And you do. And I don't understand why up here that you don't come out and say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did do this. This is what took place. Why don't you do that? I don't understand. I really don't, Jonathan. You know we've got you. At this point, an investigator says, let me just look at your hands. That's the end of the statement. Then they go back to asking Jonathan about his lighter. They don't address any injuries on his hands. They also, by the way, do not take him for an exam at the hospital to discuss any injuries on his hands. So here is my favorite bad guy, Jack Davidson, and he's going to tell us another story. You want me to tell you really what happened? I think you got it backwards. And I think you're trying to tell us one thing, But on that day, I think that morning, you went down there to the dollar store, across the railroad tracks over there by King Cone, and you bought the tennis shoes. You brought them back to the house, and there was nobody there at the house. You didn't catch a taxi at that time. You went to the telephone at that time and made a call to the taxi about 2 or 3 or whatever time it was to come and pick you up. And then he picked you up and you told him to drive around there. And then a little later on that night, around 7:30, that's when you and Casey came up to your aunt and asked to stay the night. And another monologue by Jack Davidson. Well, you didn't know where you did it or not, to be quite honest with you. I don't think you really, when that happened out there, I don't really believe that you thought you had killed him or hurt him that bad or anything else until you realized that you had when you bent over there to check him. And I'll about bet you at that particular point, that's when your lighter dropped out of your pocket, you bent over there to check him. And then you found out that the old man died as a result of it. Now it may, right now, or I don't know whether the fact he died of a heart attack or he was struggling at that particular point and died of a heart attack or what it might have been. But the thing about it, you need to get on record at that particular time. You need to put it here on the recording. You need to go ahead and tell us the truth and stop the inconsistencies and show the people that what you are to tell us to be the truth. And I think that you can rely upon it. You can rely upon the fact that it is the truth. Now that you have told us so many inconsistencies, you admit that. And just for good measure, we're going to round out some time with some more Jack Davidson. I know you didn't hurt him. I know you didn't want to hurt him. I know that. I'm not saying that you wanted to. I'm not saying you went up there for that purpose. I'm not saying that, okay? You're the only one who is saying that. What I want you to do is tell me the truth. What did take place there? That's all I want. And you can. And Jonathan says, if I knew what took place there, I would have told you. At this point, Frank Dorton joins the conversation again and actually tries to convince Jonathan to discuss whomever might have done the killing and said, don't worry, you won't get named as a narc. You've got to protect yourself. And Jonathan says, I really don't know who killed the man. But now we are going to get a Frank Dorton diatribe. Okay, well, no, there is a little difference. It could say it well. It could be him or it couldn't be. Just don't say that. This says you did this. Now, it don't say that you struck that blow or however he was killed. It don't mean that you didn't do that. It means that you was there when it happened. Had to be. There's no other way around it. Now, if you wasn't acting with somebody else, that means you did it. And there is no question you or somebody else did this together. No doubt. The only thing that I don't know is why. What your intention was. You decided to have an intention. If you got a ride from him and decided, well, I'm going to rob him or whatever, if that's what it was, then that's what you need to tell us. There is a difference between the actions, and you're only responsible for what your actions were. So I really can't understand. I can understand somebody lying and trying to cover up for something, but once you're caught, and you know that you're caught, and you know that what we've been telling you is the truth. I know that what you've been telling me is not the truth. You've admitted it, Jonathan. Frank Dorton, the only thing we can do is when it comes time to talk to the Commonwealth attorney is explain to him what you did, your level of cooperation. Jonathan said that he done this, that he didn't intend to kill this man, and if that's what it is, it is. He went there with the intent to do this, it got out of hand, and something else happened. That's your story, and this is the only chance this lawyer is going to have to hear your story, most likely. Jack Davidson adds, and really, you're the one that holds the key to it, Jonathan. And I don't understand. We're going to check out everything that you've told us, and we're going to come up with more and more inconsistencies. And then it's just going to compound and add to the whole situation. Now, literally, Jack Davidson and Frank Dorton feel they have not gotten through to Jonathan yet. So this next rant is Jack Davidson, Frank Dorton makes an interjection, and then Jack Davidson. Jack Davidson, you're not a bad person. You're really not. I talked to an individual and I told him, I said, Chris, you're not a bad person. You just did a bad thing. And he said, yeah, I know, Jack, I have. Let me tell you about it. You have done a bad thing. It's not good. Please don't continue with a bad thing. Show that you're not a bad person. And you're not a bad person because of what? Something that's happened? Can you reason that really, Jonathan? Can you understand that? We know you're not a bad person. Something happened up there and you need to get it off your mind. And you need to tell us right now what took place. Frank Dorton. We guarantee you it's going to make you feel better. Jack Davidson. Jonathan, don't start now. Don't start with this no stuff now, okay? That even solidifies it. Please, please. And I've seen you here. I've seen your eyes when I started talking to you. And you are not a bad person. You are not. You've got a lot of goodness in you. But something happened up there. And just like you said with your temper and everything else, maybe something got out of hand. But that doesn't mean that you're bad. I've got a temper too. I've got a temper and I explode. And there is things that I do that I don't mean to do. There is times that I explode and there's no words and I say what I don't mean to say. I don't think you planned this. I don't think you had the intent of doing this. I honestly don't believe you did this. I don't honestly believe that you set and formed this in your mind at this particular point. And you are not a bad person. I don't know why I think you even think of yourself as being a bad person because of doing this. And you shouldn't. All of us make mistakes. This is a major mistake we make. And there are some minor mistakes we make. We're human. But when you get to a point of denying everything, even almost to yourself, then that's putting you in the role of being a bad person. It's time for you. And Frank knows, I know that you did this. It's time that you show us that you are not a bad person and tell us the truth. If you can't face it at that particular point, you can tell us what you do know a little at a time, and we'll talk to you. We'll work with you, and we'll tell the Commonwealth attorney what took place. And we'll try to rectify it as best we can. But Jonathan, it takes you. It really takes you, and you know that. You didn't form that intent. It just so happened. And I would say a happenstance. And you know that, Jonathan. Tell us what really took place. Jonathan continues to be interrogated like this for another 30 pages of Frank Dorton and Jack Davidson diatribes. It is the next day where we get the excerpts of that confession. So remember that he was picked up at 7:30 and was literally interrogated for hours before the confession came the next morning. And in the confession, Jack Davidson is very kind because he actually corrects some errors that Jonathan had made, including where the knife was held, because Jonathan at one point states he had it in his hand, and Jack Davidson says, no, it was in your pocket. So, very helpful statements. So what I'm going to do is stop this video here because that was 28 intense minutes of interrogation. And now we will start to talk about other evidence on the next video.